the dog who wouldn't stop barking. Every morning at precisely 6:17, Bruno began to bark. It wasn't the casual bark of a restless dog or the sharp warning meant for passing strangers. It was deliberate, measured, persistent, directed at the same place across the narrow road, the abandoned house with its cracked windows and rusted gate. The sound sliced through the stillness of the neighborhood, forcing curtains to twitch and tempers to rise. Zara Malik had grown used to apologizing. She would step onto the porch in her pale blue robe, wrap her arms around herself against the early chill, and call Bruno back with gentle firmness. The dog always hesitated before obeying, his dark eyes fixed on the lifeless structure as if he were trying to speak in a language no one understood. "Enough," she would whisper, though she wasn't sure whether she meant it for Bruno or for herself. Inside, Ayaan Malik rarely reacted anymore. He used to complain about the noise during the first few months after they moved into the house. Now, he barely looked up from his phone. He would scroll, expression blank, thumb moving in restless swipes, the glow of the screen reflected in his distant eyes. Their marriage had once been animated by shared laughter and impulsive midnight tea. 3 years ago, Ayaan would have wrapped his arms around Zara from behind while she prepared breakfast, pressing a playful kiss to her temple. Now, he dressed in silence, adjusting his cufflinks with meticulous care, his cologne lingering longer than his words. "Will you be late tonight?" Zara asked one morning, keeping her tone light. "Probably," he replied without meeting her gaze. There'd a lot going on. There was always a lot going on. He had started coming home past 10, sometimes 11. He blamed new clients, unexpected meetings, traffic. His explanations were tidy, rehearsed. Yet something about them felt hollow, like the abandoned house, standing but empty. Zara tried not to let suspicion root itself in her chest. Doubt was corrosive, and she had always prided herself on being trusting. But trust requires presence, and Ayaan seemed increasingly absent even when seated across from her at dinner. Bruno barked again the next morning, louder than before. This time, Zara noticed something she hadn't seen earlier, a faint flicker behind one of the upstairs windows of the abandoned house. It could have been a trick of the light, she told herself. A reflection, a passing car. Yet the street was quiet, and the house had been empty for years. Or so everyone believed. Later that afternoon, as Zara folded laundry in the bedroom, she heard Ayaan's phone vibrate. It buzzed once, then again, insistently. He was in the shower, water rushing steadily behind the door. She didn't intend to look, but the phone lay face up on the nightstand, the screen illuminated by a message preview before it disappeared. She caught only a fragment. "Same time tonight." Her hands froze mid-fold. The message vanished before she could see the sender's name. When Ayaan emerged from the bathroom, towel slung low around his waist, she was seated on the edge of the bed, the phone exactly where it had been. "Your phone rang," she said carefully. "Work," he answered too quickly. "Nothing important." He picked it up and slipped it into his pocket. That night, he left at 9:30, claiming he had forgotten a document at the office. Zara stood at the living room window long after his car disappeared. Bruno paced beside her, restless. When the clock struck 10, the dog suddenly stiffened. His ears perked. Without warning, he sprinted toward the gate and began barking with renewed urgency, fiercer than ever before. Zara's heart thudded. She stepped outside, following his line of sight. Across the street, in the upper window of the abandoned house, a dim light glowed. Steady this time, unmistakable. Her breath caught. The house was not empty. And if someone was inside, why did Bruno bark only on mornings after Ayaan came home late? The thought slipped into her mind, uninvited, dangerous, and sharp. No, she told herself. That was absurd. Yet as she stood there in the darkness, watching the faint silhouette shift behind cracked glass, a cold certainty settled over her. Whatever Bruno sensed, it wasn't random. It was connected. A car engine hummed softly somewhere nearby. Zara turned toward the sound. From the corner of the street, headlights briefly illuminated the abandoned house before dimming. The vehicle rolled quietly to a stop behind the broken gate. Out of clear view, but close enough. Her pulse roared in her ears. She couldn't see who stepped out. But she didn't need to. Bruno's barking stopped abruptly, not because the house had gone dark, but because the door had opened, and someone had gone inside. Zara remained frozen on the porch, the cool night air pressing against her skin as a realization began to take shape. Fragile, terrifying, and impossible to ignore. For the first time, she wondered if Bruno wasn't warning the neighborhood at all. Maybe he was trying to warn her. The light behind the window. Zara did not sleep that night. She lay awake beside the empty stretch of bed where Ayaan should have been, staring at the ceiling as the image of the glowing window replayed in her mind. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the door of the abandoned house opening, swallowing someone whole. The silence that followed felt louder than Bruno's barking. At 6:17, the barking began again. This time, Zara was already dressed. She stood at the window before Bruno reached the gate, watching the house with a steadiness she did not feel. The upstairs light was gone. The windows were dark, the structure hollow and lifeless once more. If she had not seen it herself, she might have believed she imagined everything. Ayaan returned shortly after 7. His shirt was slightly wrinkled, his eyes shadowed with fatigue. He smelled faintly of unfamiliar perfume beneath his cologne, sweet, floral, not hers. "You're up early," he said, forcing casualness into his voice. "So are you," she replied. He hesitated only a fraction of a second before answering. "Long night at the office." Zara studied him carefully. His tone was smooth, practiced, too smooth. She realized, with a clarity that frightened her, that he had perfected the art of speaking without revealing anything at all. Bruno approached him slowly, sniffing at his trousers. The dog did not wag his tail. Ayaan stepped back. "What's wrong with him lately?" "He only barks at one place," Zara said evenly. Across the street. Ayaan followed her gaze to the abandoned house. For the briefest moment, something flickered in his expression, recognition perhaps, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "It's empty," he said dismissively. "Probably rats." Zara said nothing. Silence had become her most reliable weapon. Later that afternoon, she did something she had never done before in their marriage. She followed him. When Ayaan left at 9 that evening, she waited exactly 5 minutes before grabbing her keys. Her hands trembled as she started the car, her pulse racing not from jealousy, but from the terrifying possibility of confirmation. Doubt still offered mercy. Proof would not. Instead of heading toward his office downtown, Ayaan's car slowed near the corner of their own street. Zara's breath caught. He parked beside the abandoned house. The world seemed to narrow to the red glow of his brake lights. For a moment, he remained inside the vehicle, his silhouette still against the windshield. Then he stepped out, glancing around briefly before slipping through the broken gate. Zara's fingers tightened around the steering wheel. She felt suspended between disbelief and devastation. The upstairs window flickered to life. The light glowed warmly, intentionally. This was no accident, no misunderstanding. Someone was waiting for him. She watched as a second shadow joined as near the window. A figure moved closer, their outlines merging. The gesture was intimate, unmistakable. Zara's chest constricted. Every late meeting, every hurried shower, every absent glance at the dinner table. They aligned now with ruthless precision, forming a pattern she could no longer ignore. Her first instinct was to storm across the street, to demand answers under the harsh glare of that light. But another instinct, quieter, stronger, held her in place. If she confronted him now, he would deny it. And she needed more than denial. She needed truth. A sudden knock on her passenger side window jolted her. Zara gasped, turning sharply. A man stood outside her car, his expression concerned but calm. He appeared to be in his early 30s, dressed casually, unfamiliar. "I'm sorry," he said through the glass, gesturing politely. "I didn't mean to scare you. I just moved into the house down the block. I noticed you've been parked here for a while." Zara lowered the window slightly, embarrassment flushing her cheeks. I was just leaving." He followed her gaze to the abandoned house, then back to her. Understanding dawned slowly in his eyes. "That place isn't as empty as people think," he said quietly. Her heart pounded. "You've seen someone there?" He nodded. "A few nights now. Same car. Same time." Zara swallowed. Do you know who it is? He hesitated, studying her face carefully as if measuring how much she could bear. I don't know his name, he said gently, but I know he doesn't look like someone who wants to be seen. Across the street, the upstairs light dimmed. Zara's hands began to shake. For the first time, the betrayal felt less like suspicion and more like an undeniable presence, alive, breathing, illuminated in that upstairs room. The stranger stepped back from her car. If you need help, he added carefully, I've been noticing things too. Zara nodded faintly, unable to speak. As she drove away, the image burned into her mind. Two shadows standing too close together in a house that was never meant to hold anyone at all. When she reached home, Bruno was waiting at the door, restless and alert. He did not bark this time. He simply watched her, as if confirming what he had always known. Zara knelt beside him, burying her fingers in his fur. I saw it, she whispered, and now that she had seen it, there was no returning to ignorance. Across the street, the abandoned house stood dark once more, its secret temporarily hidden, but no longer invisible, because someone else had seen it too. And next time, she would not be alone. Evidence in the shadows. By morning, suspicion had hardened into resolve. Zara moved through the kitchen with mechanical precision. Brewing coffee she had no intention of drinking. Across the table, Ayaan skimmed headlines on his phone, the screen's glow masking his expression. He looked ordinary, calm, composed, familiar. That normalcy unsettled her more than guilt would have. How was the office? She asked, her tone steady. Busy, he replied without hesitation. We're closing a deal. He had grown fluent in half-truths. Each answer arrived smoothly, polished by repetition. Zara wondered how long deception had lived between them unnoticed, like dust settling in corners she had stopped inspecting. Bruno lay near the door, watchful. When Ayaan stood to leave, the dog did not approach him. The distance between man and animal mirrored the widening space inside the marriage. After Ayaan's car disappeared down the street, Zara stepped outside. The abandoned house loomed across from her, its facade weathered but defiant. In daylight, it appeared harmless, almost pathetic. Yet she knew what darkness concealed. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. The stranger from the previous night stood at her gate. Up close, he looked composed but concerned, as though he had already anticipated this conversation. I'm Rohan, he said gently. I didn't mean to intrude yesterday. Zara, she replied. For a moment, neither spoke. The abandoned house stood between them, silent but heavy with implication. I've seen him there 3 times, Rohan said carefully. Same pattern. Late evening. Lights upstairs. Zara forced herself to meet his eyes. You're sure? He nodded. I wouldn't have said anything if I wasn't. The confirmation felt like a verdict. Still, she needed more than shared observation. She needed something undeniable. I have security cameras installed at my place, Rohan added after a pause. They cover part of the street. If you want, I can check the recordings. Zara hesitated. Accepting meant surrendering to truth. Yet ignorance was no longer protection. It was humiliation. Please, she said. That afternoon, she sat in Rohan's modest living room as he replayed footage from the past week. The screen displayed the quiet street in grainy detail. Timestamps flickered in the corner. At 9:32 p.m., Ayaan's car appeared. Zara's breath caught. The footage showed him stepping out, glancing around, and entering the abandoned house with familiarity. No hesitation, no confusion. Minutes later, the upstairs window illuminated. On another night, a second figure arrived earlier. A woman with long hair, her movements confident. She unlocked the door before Ayaan reached it. Zara's chest tightened. This was no spontaneous mistake. It was routine. Rohan paused the video. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Zara stared at the frozen image of her husband standing beneath a window that was never supposed to glow. She felt no dramatic surge of anger, only a slow unraveling, as if threads she had woven carefully over years were being pulled loose one by one. How long? She murmured. Rohan didn't answer. The question wasn't for him. When she returned home, The house felt unfamiliar. Every object seemed staged, every memory suspect. She walked into the bedroom and opened Ayaan's closet. His shirts were arranged neatly, as always. Beneath them, tucked in a drawer she rarely touched, she found something that didn't belong. A receipt. Dinner for two. A date from last month. A restaurant she had once suggested visiting together. The realization pierced deeper than the footage. He had borrowed pieces of their marriage to construct something elsewhere. That evening, Zara did not wait for him to leave. She prepared dinner as usual, set the table for two, and lit a single candle. When Ayaan entered, surprise flickered across his face. "What's the occasion?" he asked lightly. "Sit," she replied. He obeyed, though unease shadowed his posture. Zara placed her phone on the table and pressed play. The security footage filled the silence between them. The grainy image of his car approaching. His silhouette stepping into the abandoned house. The upstairs light blooming alive. Ayaan's face drained of color. He reached for the phone, but she moved it out of his grasp. "How long?" she asked again, her voice calm but unyielding. He opened his mouth, closed it, then exhaled sharply. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." He looked away, searching for language that could soften impact. "It started a few months ago. I didn't plan for it to happen." The confession landed with brutal clarity. "Her name?" Zara asked. He hesitated. That hesitation was answer enough. "It doesn't matter," he said finally. "It doesn't mean anything." Zara almost laughed at the absurdity. "You went there every week." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration surfacing now that denial had failed. "You've been distant too, Zara. We both have." She absorbed the deflection without reacting. Blame was easier than accountability. "I saw you," she said quietly. "In the window." The words shifted something in him. His shoulders sagged. "I never meant to hurt you." Intent felt irrelevant in the face of action. Bruno began barking outside, sharp and relentless. The sound cut through the room like an alarm refusing to be silenced. Ayaan stood abruptly. "I need air." He moved toward the door, but Zara spoke before he could leave. "Is she there tonight?" He stopped. Across the street, the upstairs window flickered to life once more. Ayaan didn't answer. He didn't have to. Zara turned toward the glowing house, understanding that the confrontation she feared was no longer between suspicion and proof. It was between staying and walking away. And for the first time, she wasn't sure which choice would hurt more. The house across the street. The light in the abandoned house did not flicker this time. It glowed steadily, unapologetically, as if daring someone to question it. Zara stood at the window, her reflection faint against the glass. Behind her, Ayaan remained motionless near the doorway, suspended between confession and escape. Bruno's barking echoed through the room, raw and insistent. "Is she there?" Zara repeated. Ayaan closed his eyes briefly. "Yes." The honesty arrived too late to soften anything. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The distance between their bodies felt symbolic. Two people sharing space, but no longer sharing truth. Zara reached for her coat. "Where are you going?" Ayaan asked, tension sharpening his voice. "To see what you've been protecting," she replied. He stepped forward instinctively. "Zara, don't do this." But she was already walking past him, her steps measured, her pulse steady in a way that surprised her. Fear had drained away, replaced by something firmer, clarity. The night air felt colder than usual as she crossed the street. Each step toward the abandoned house stripped away illusion. This was no longer about suspicion or betrayal. It was about witnessing reality without flinching. Behind her, she heard Ayaan follow. The broken gate creaked as she pushed it open. Up close, the house smelled faintly of dust and something sweeter. Perfume carried through cracked windows. The upstairs light cast a muted glow onto the staircase inside. Zara entered without knocking. The interior was less derelict than expected. Someone had cleaned a path through the debris. A small lamp stood in the corner, its warm light softening the peeling paint. Two cups rested on a makeshift table. It wasn't chaos. It was intention. Footsteps sounded above. Ayaan reached her side, his breathing uneven. "You don't have to." I do, she said quietly. A woman appeared at the top of the stairs. She was younger than Zara had imagined, though not by much. Her long hair fell loosely over her shoulders, and her expression shifted from confusion to comprehension within seconds. She looked not malicious, but startled. I didn't know, the woman said immediately, her voice low. Zara studied her carefully. There was no triumph in her eyes, no challenge, only realization. This woman had expected secrecy, not confrontation. Did he tell you he was married? Zara asked. Ayaan stiffened. The woman's gaze flicked briefly toward him before returning to Zara. He said things were complicated, that you were distant. The word hung heavily in the air. Zara let out a slow breath. The narrative was painfully predictable. A husband dissatisfied, a story of emotional neglect, a promise that lines were already blurred. She recognized the script because she had lived its opposite. He wasn't leaving, Zara said, more to the woman than to Ayaan. He was dividing. Silence settled across the room. Ayaan stepped forward, frustration edging into his voice. Can we not do this here? Here is exactly where it belongs, Zara replied. She looked around once more, the lamp, the cups, the effort taken to make ruin feel intimate. This house had been chosen for concealment, for convenience. It stood directly across from their home, close enough for ease, far enough for secrecy. The audacity of it struck her with sudden force. You came here every week, she said to Ayaan. You watched me through our window and still walked in here. His jaw tightened. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? She asked. He faltered, the absence of an answer more revealing than any confession. The woman on the stairs exhaled slowly. I didn't know he was still committed. Zara met her eyes. He was committed, just not honest. Bruno's barking drifted faintly from across the street, as though punctuating the truth. For the first time that evening, anger surfaced, not wild or explosive, but controlled and resolute. You built something here, Zara said to Ayaan, but you dismantled something there. He looked toward the doorway, as if calculating escape. It didn't mean what you think. It meant enough to lie, she replied. The woman stepped back slightly, distance forming between her and Ayaan. You told me you were unhappy, she said to him quietly. You never said you were unwilling to fix it. Zara understood then that this confrontation was not a triangle of rivalry. It was a mirror held up to one man's cowardice. She felt unexpectedly calm. I won't compete for my own marriage, she said, turning toward the stairs. You can have this house. Ayaan's voice rose slightly. Zara, wait. She paused at the doorway, but did not look back. You chose where you wanted to be, she said. Now you can stay there. Outside, the night felt expansive rather than suffocating. The abandoned house no longer seemed mysterious, just hollow. As she crossed the street, Bruno ran to meet her, his tail low but his barking silenced. She knelt briefly, resting her forehead against his. Behind her, the upstairs light remained on. Ayaan did not follow this time. Zara entered her home alone, the quiet settling differently around her. It was not the silence of suspicion anymore. It was the silence of decision. From the window, she could still see the illuminated room across the street. But for the first time, she understood something clearly. The house had never been abandoned. The abandonment had happened here. And now, she would decide whether anything inside it was worth saving.